Bigfoot did not take his food or steal his food, but they would take some from his garden. It was sort of like understood, but they didn't abuse the privilege. And he also had a spot where if he had leftover food that was good, he would take it out and leave it for them. So that's an example of how something evolves over weeks or months.
Interesting, but out of curiosity, why don't these people ever take any photographs or videos of their encounter, when this goes on?
There's two reasons off the top of my head. One is the Bigfoot do not want to be photographed, and they will go to the extremes to avoid it. So that's one thing. Another thing is every witness that I have talked to who has these interactions with the Bigfoot do not want to put them in jeopardy. So we always kind of camouflage where they actually are, and many times we don't use the name of the person, not because they are hesitant to come forth about their information, but because they don't want people to know where these Bigfoot are. The people become very protective of the Bigfoot that have befriended them.
I can see it, because there is a lot of people I've had on my show, are getting to the point where they feel the only way they can prove a Bigfoot exists is by shooting one. And that it's I hate to say it, sometimes I even kind of lean that way, at least to prove that they exist. But man, I hate to see any life of any form, be extinguished.
The Bigfoot can sense who they can trust and who they can't, and that's why you don't find these people that are on these TV shows out there with all their equipment trying to capture evidence of them. The Bigfoot will outsmart them.
Oh yeah, I mean, come on! If you're out looking for one thing, I always tell people, if you're going to go out and look for a Bigfoot or a goat man or Thunderbird, you're not going to find it. You usually find these things accidental, and maybe after years of going out, not even looking for it, and all of a sudden you stumble across one. That's how most of the reports are.
That's the way it's been with everyone I've talked to. They were not out looking for them.
Yeah.
So the paths just kind of crossed in a very natural way. While we're on the whole idea of the families, I want to tell you a cute story. There's a woman who has been able to communicate with the Bigfoot since she was a child, and she's so good at it that Dr. Igor Burtsev, who was the head of the, let's see if I can remember the name, the International Center of Hominology in Siberia, invited her over to Russia when they were exploring a very large cave that were known for the Bigfoot. And so her abilities are really known internationally, though she's a very simple woman who lives, she and her husband live in a very simple place. And obviously they have land around them. And at one point in her life, she had a Shetland pony. And no matter what she did, this Shetland pony would always get out of the fence. Whether it was electrical or whatever kind they put up, the Shetland pony would get out. And so she got this 250-foot boat rope and anchored him to his quarters, so to speak. And every night she'd go to bed, and he was out there anchored to the field. And every morning, or almost every morning, she would get up and he would be gone. She would find him in the woods. And not only would she find him in the woods, his water container and his feed container would be dragged out there too. And on one of these episodes, she noticed that there were muddy handprints on the Shetland pony. And the part of the story that I think is really cute is she found muddy butt prints on the Shetland pony. The Bigfoot were using the Shetland pony to entertain their children.
Oh, wow. That is so interesting.
And they took care of the Shetland pony. They knew he needed food and water, and so they would drag it out there. And she said even when she got a larger, heavier container for the water, it still would get dragged out there. And another time, this long rope that I mentioned, 250 feet, was wrapped around the trees, but it was above the head of the Shetland pony, so he could not have done that. So that was one way that they used to, contain the pony.
That's interesting. And to even associate, the pony to give like pony rides to the offsprings, I find that so interesting. And, I hate to say it, it's funny, but you know what? It probably was a big amusement, for the Bigfoot.
I'm sure it was. It would be for human children.
Oh, yeah. And I again, it sounds like, too, the Bigfoot kind of share the same type of joys that us humanoids enjoy, like going in the water, playing in the water with the young ones, and getting on the back of a horse, and getting a ride and all that stuff. It tells me that they're a lot more intelligent than I actually have given them credit for.
And they, like I said, will continue with this idea of amusement. One man had a campfire, and it was kind of burning down. It was just embers. And I guess he was off in where he wasn't readily seen, and a Bigfoot came up and took one of the sticks that was burning, or the embers, and he was just taking it and swinging it around in the air. So in the dark, you get this kind of a fireworks effect, and he was doing it just to entertain himself. So that's another human side of the Bigfoot. We as human beings are genetically related to them, and you may already be familiar with the work of Dr. Ketchum.
Oh, yes.
And she's the first one who did the DNA analysis on quite a few different samples, and what they found was that the maternal side of the Bigfoot is human, and the male side, they cannot identify it with any known species. So I guess that makes us kind of like cousins, since the maternal side is human. And so I think of them as being in fact, we made some T-shirts just for some of our friends, and it has a picture of a cartoon of the Bigfoot that I did on my book, and it just says Bigfoot, mankind's cousin. And I really kind of feel that way.
Again,
so I must admit that if one came through my office door right now, I would my heart would start beating like crazy. I think it would be a real adjustment to coming face to face with an actual Bigfoot.
I can tell you, it can be scary when you're not expecting it.
Yeah, I know. He told me that you had an experience that scared you.
Yeah, it still does. I mean, occasionally I'll have a nightmare, about it, and even that many years ago. But you know what?
We had this couple, probably in their 20s and 30s, and they had done a lot of research on Bigfoot, and they went out deliberately into the remote areas here in the mountains of western North Carolina, and spent the night, and they were actually mentally sending out a message that they would like to connect with the Bigfoot. Well, they're essentially being quiet or meditative, and they were encircled by Bigfoot. They couldn't see them, but they could hear the footprints, they could hear the sounds they made, and telepathically, the Bigfoot let them know that they didn't want to physically, become visible to them, because they knew that their size scared humans easily, and they didn't want to do that.
Interesting. Yeah, so they have a thought pattern kind of like we do. So they rationalize things. So that's really interesting. Again, why don't we mention the name of your book and where they can find it also? We can do that a couple of times.
It's called Bigfoot Beyond the Footprints. It's available through Amazon. And it is packed with photos. I mean, you get to see the samples, you get to see some of the footprints, you get to see some of the caves that they live in. There's just lots of visuals to go with it, kind of like the website, which I know you're already somewhat familiar with. And I always try to have visual illustrations to go with whatever I've written about. And whenever possible, I try to keep everything very condensed and easy to read because people are so busy. They're interested in all this, but they don't want to wade through tons and tons of pages because life is just too hectic for most people.
Oh, yeah. You're so right. I mean, I've had a couple authors on my show that wrote books in like 588 pages. And they were wondering.
I would never do that.
Yeah, and then they were wondering why it wasn't selling. And I said, I read part of your book. It's really fantastic. It's really good. But you just go into it too much. I mean, anything after probably 300 pages enough, I hate to say it, will turn people off.
They take the academic approach to everything. I try very much to do authentic research and interviews and get the evidence. But I don't feel like I have to spell out everything step by step and how I did it and when I did it. And people won't retain everything if you do give all the details. So I present it in a way that's more to the point.
Yeah. Now, James is out there. Now, James, you got a question or two? We got to go on news break or for the radio stations in about 2 minutes, but you have a question.
I do. Joyce, do you think, because a lot of researchers throughout the years have really changed over from thinking that Bigfoot is flesh and blood cryptid to maybe they're alien, interdimensional, or a spiritual being? What's your take on that, and how do you feel about it?
Oh, that's a loaded question. We only have 2 minutes till break time, huh? There was one Bigfoot that when he was dying, he was friends with this one woman, and he was very, very angry because the military had befriended him and acted like they were friends. And then when they got him, they injected him with tracking devices. They did things to minimize his, or to turn off his ability to do telepathy and, different talents that Bigfoot seemed to have. And he felt so betrayed, and he was just plain angry at what the military had done. There are stories about the Bigfoot being used by the military. I sometimes wonder if they even clone, creatures that they can use for their own devious purposes. I do think that the Bigfoots have abilities that perhaps we used to have, that we've turned them off, like we can't. I think we have the ability to be telepathic, which is the way they tend to communicate. And we've become, so distracted by our computers and cell phones that we dumb down ourselves. And so we've lost some of those kind of abilities. As far as vanishing, if they're able to do that, and there's a lot of people who claim that they've seen evidence of that, I personally have not seen that. But if that's true, I don't know what to say. But that may very well be the case.
Do you think they have a realm, they can see in a realm of vision that maybe they can see things we can't see? Maybe that's why they can spot cameras, because, with all the technology out there, we hardly ever get a good picture of them.
One of the witnesses told me that they can sense our feelings from a great distance. So they can sense our fear, they can sense our intentions, and because they're able to do that, they're able to flee from us if necessary. That probably doesn't answer your question, but that's what popped into my mind.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And I was curious, the other guy there that you were talking about that was interacting with them, has he ever collected any scat or hair?
After the break, I will tell you my experience with that.
Okay.
Because he says he has to go to commercial, so we'll deal with samples.
Okay, Mary and James, we do need to go on break. I'm going to put you on hold, Mary, for about 3 minutes. So we'll be back in 3 minutes with Mary Joyce and James and myself, Gary, on Night Dreams Talk Radio After Dark.